The effect of belonging to a group can be like a drug, basically. We will want to benefit our group mates even when we personally gain nothing. We will take physical pleasure. Our brains will light up when out-group members fail or suffer. And we will sacrifice and even kill and die for our groups. In many parts of the world, including the regions of greatest national security interest to the United States, the group identities that matter most to the people on the ground are ones that Americans are often barely aware of. Often, these group identities are not national, which is something we're very good at focusing on, but rather ethnic, regional, religious, sectarian, or clan-based. In our foreign policy, U.S. foreign policy, for at least a half century, we have been spectacularly blind to the power of group identity, the importance of group identity. In the United States, for reasons that are fascinating, that I have a whole chapter on, in the United States, we tend to view the world in terms of great ideological battles, capitalism versus communism. After that, we moved to authoritarianism versus democracy. And then most recently, after 9/11, the free world versus the axis of evil. Blinded by our ideological prisms, we in the United States have repeatedly ignored more primal group divisions, which for billions around the world are the most powerful and meaningful and which drive political upheaval all over the world. This blindness has led to some of our greatest foreign policy debacles in the last 15 years. So, take the Vietnam War. Arguably the greatest humiliation the U.S. has ever suffered. We saw everything through a Cold War lens. We saw ourselves as fighting a great enemy, communism. And we believed all we could think about was that if tiny Vietnam fell, then the whole region would go communist. This is the theory known as the domino effect. But because of these ideological blinders, we completely missed the extent to which the Vietnamese people were actually fighting for their independence. That is, nationalism, for their sovereignty, after having been colonized for over 1,000 years, first by China and then by the French. So in the 60s and 70s, the United States foreign policy makers all saw Vietnam as just a pawn of communist China. That's kind of how they thought of it. So in 1995, former Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara, this is the U.S. former secretary, he met his former counterpart, the foreign minister of North Vietnam. It was a very, very famous meeting, recorded. And his former enemy, the minister of North Vietnam, said to Secretary McNamara, "Secretary, you must never have read a history book. If you had, you'd have known that we weren't pawns of China. Don't you understand that we've been fighting China for 1,000 years? We were fighting for our independence, and we would fight to the last man. And no amount of bombing, no amount of U.S. pressure would ever have stopped us." So that part of it, I bet most of you in this room vaguely know. But there's something else we missed in the United States, and this is something that I bet most of you don't know. U.S. foreign policy makers in the Vietnam War also missed a critical ethnic dimension, internal to Vietnam, which doomed us from the beginning in the battle for the hearts and minds of the people.